I'll count down.
Did it go?
It didn't. I'll do it. Hello and welcome to
Absolute Game Off.
Nerd! We are your non-geek, non-nerd hosts, and today we are live for the first time, I think.
We've done a few live things, like the comics and cards challenge we did live.
That's right.
We've done a few things live. We did that top 5 once, remember, live. We've done a few things live.
Yeah, so this is sort of we're new at this live thing, so bear with us here today. But we have a king of a topic to discuss tonight, and so Rohan, what are we doing? We normally interview people every week, and so we've now changed the format.
Yeah, so I think for those, we've talked with a few people, but like for those obviously that most don't know, like, so we've talked about switching up the format here from an interview to more of like, if you're a sports fan and you've watched the show Undisputed, JP is what he pitched this to me is how he described it, and it's a good parallel in the sense that like both he and I are, we have opinions. I especially have a lot of hot takes, we'll say, you may say, and so like we're just gonna pick topics each week. And we're just going to have a live discussion. If you're here in the chat watching, by all means, weigh in, respond. We'd love to see it. But yeah, so today's first topic of the first episode of this new format is we're going to be discussing Jack Kirby. Obviously, if you've watched any of our previous interviews, Jack Kirby has come up in conversation for a number of reasons, a number of times. And you'll often hear JP chime in that Jack Kirby sucks, and then I'll counter that. And so why it sounded like a perfect reason for our first debate topic to be Jack Kirby, king or clown. Did I miss anything? Did I explain that? Did I get everything there, JP? What was that sound?
Yeah, I think you did.
Awesome. All right, so let's. I
don't know. We had a little bit of reverb there.
Oh yeah, let's jump in. So JP, you've well expressed your opinion on Jack Kirby. Why don't you go ahead and so let's just start at what is our baseline like? For me, Jack Kirby is my all-time favorite comic book artist. I, in fact, do think he is the king. JP, where do you stand in this equation?
Okay, I will not deny the fact that Jack Kirby is a legend in the Marvel and DC comic world. He has iconic covers, splash pages, say as you may. But I still don't think he is one of the top artists in the Marvel DC universe.
Now,
I believe that the characters.
Oh, no,
I believe his characters made him famous, not his art. His characters made him famous, not his art.
Got it. So your argument then essentially is his ability to actually draw is not that good relative to artists that you like or have seen or know, or who else are considered, the greats of the hobby.
Correct. And let me start from the beginning. Okay. Yeah. So the beginning starts with this book for me, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Okay. I got this for Christmas some year, 25, 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago. I don't remember. But I loved to draw. I was an artist back in the day. And I got this book and I went through this book to see how to draw various characters. And I did not like any of the Jack Kirby. I didn't even care to pay attention to how he drew any of the pages in here. I went strictly to John Buscema and looked how he drew. And this may not be Buscema, but let's just say how that's drawn versus what Jack Kirby did. So I was not drawn to Jack Kirby, even having this early on when he is forefront in this book with Buscema as well. And I never went back to find old titles to find Jack Kirby art. Once I started to draw on my own and I saw how McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld drew, I was drawn to those characters. And I think by far they are better artists than Kirby. And my argument is those artists were made big because of their artwork on a well-known character, whereas Kirby got well known for inventing some of these characters.
So let me ask you this question. Actually, I first want to highlight this comment by Vintage Lord Canada, who says John Romita is king. I'm assuming you mean John Romita Sr. Right. I will agree with Vintage Lord that he is my favorite Spider-Man artist. Yes, for those that are Todd McFarlane lovers, I personally love John Romita more. But I think it's a great call. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that would say John Romita is the best. I know Lawrence from Mighty Comics would say John Romita is his favorite as well. So I think it's a totally valid comment. Now, my counter to that is, so I'll use a parallel here to describe this. So in music, when we talk about the greatest guitarists, right? They talk about things like, oh, is it Jimi Hendrix? Is it Stevie Ray Vaughan? Or do you go back before him? And is it why am I blanking on the guy like Muddy Waters, or is it Robert Johnson, or, and when you kind of go back in the past, like, especially you go all the way back to Robert. Do you know who Robert Johnson is by any chance, JP?
Doesn't sound familiar.
So Robert Johnson is this old blues guy from way before like the guys of Jimi Hendrix. And like the story is like he sold his soul to the devil for the ability to play guitar. Anyways, like he has some of the earliest blues albums. And if you listen to them, which I've actually owned this CD in the past, but it's just him by himself, like on his guitar. It's very simple, basic blues. But that's kind of like the birth of blues is where a lot of people say it. And then so you say each successive artist kind of build upon that, right? And so then you go from there, you go to Muddy Waters, let's say. From there, you go to Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Come more recent, you have Tom Morello. And all of these artists would say, I would not be where I'm at today if not the groundwork by said previous artist was done prior to me, et cetera, as you go down the line. So my question is to your comment when you say, especially you bring up Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane. And I would actually say, and I would note, I know Rob Liefeld says, and I even shared it to the podcast to you, where he talks specifically on Jack Kirby and has his admiration for Jack Kirby. I would say like none of those guys get to their level without Jack Kirby being there first. Now, that's not to say, again, that's not necessarily an argument for who can draw this better, right? That's just saying we wouldn't be where it's kind of like also like similar to like athletes, right? We're always getting bigger, stronger, and faster. Similar, I think, like in drawing, like, we get better at the technique, at the skills and things like that. So it's hard to necessarily, in my opinion, that's why I think in almost anything, it's hard to judge one era to a completely different era because the evolution of that specific piece or whatever it is, whether it be sports, whether it be art, whether it be whatever. I'm just curious your thoughts on that in terms of kind of how.
No, that's why you can't debate his legendary or iconic status. But go back to the golden age, and let me see if I can present a few screens here to see what we got. And let me just go back to the golden age.
Jack Kirby was in the golden age, remember?
Exactly, yeah, he was, and he was a war veteran, World War II. So I can't talk badly on him for any of those reasons. Let me just try to find. There it is. Let me know if you can see it yet.
No, I don't see it. It's just me and you on the screen right now. There we go. Here we go. Coming up. Look at our live skills are just killing it. Yeah, so you got Marvel Comics 1 there. I don't know why it's
freaking slow here. I'm still. All right, so who drew this?
Is it Bill Everett? I don't remember exactly.
No one remember. It's Frank Paul cover. You got Bill Everett right for internal pages, but Frank Paul drew the cover. I mean, is this cover famous for the art, or is it famous for the first appearance of I think this is the first appearance of the Human Torch.
This
is
book is
Marvel Comics.
I think this book is famous because of the comic's significance.
Correct. The artwork in here is Golden Age artwork. It wasn't refined yet, but if I bring up one of my, I'll go grab it.
You could have had these things ready, JP. We're live.
They're ready. Don't worry. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Where'd you go here?
I'm here.
The screen. There we are. Phantom Lady, Matt Baker.
Yeah.
Much better cover than the one we just saw, right? All same Golden Age. Matt
Correct.
Baker was definitely better at drawing certain things. So, is Kirby famous because he drew those first couple those characters, and that's why he's a legend? It could have been anybody else.
Well, I mean,
could have been anybody else.
Let me run a little bit with my side of the argument here. So, I think we have to look at, it's not just a few characters, right? We're talking about almost the entire, like, I mean, even though it is the Silver Age, the kind of golden era of Marvel started in the Silver Age, and every single character almost has Jack Kirby's imagination written all over it, right? You've got the Avengers, you got X-Men, you got Fantastic Four. You know, he didn't do the Spider-Man run, but he did the cover of AF-15. So the first image of Spider-Man we got was Jack Kirby. You know, all of these characters, and then you take that even, you know, that it wasn't just the characters. It was, he crafted what the entire Marvel universe was, right? Like the famous quote from Jack Kirby is, my budget is just the limits of my imagination, and my imagination has no limits. So, and he really put that to practice. I mean, you think about all the characters, you take it from the cosmic side with Galactus and Silver Surfer, he dreamed that up. You take it to the gods, you got Thor and Odin and Loki and Asgard, right? And those headdresses and all that stuff he came up with, right? All the characters with Fantastic Four and X-Men and the Avengers, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, all of those characters. He envisioned, like Stan Lee obviously wrote those characters, but it was Jack Kirby's vision and imagination that designed what those characters were going to be and what they look like. And for the most part, those, you know, obviously they've been evolved a little bit, but those, you know, Iron Man's armor is still red and yellow and still is essentially the same thing that he created. Thor's outfit looks near identical today. His imagination has carried through, even though it's drawn a little differently, and in your opinion, maybe drawn a little better. It's still his original plan and imagination of how those characters look that is carried, you know, all the way into the MCU, right? Secondly, right, again, naming all those characters and those runs that he's doing all that work at the same time. And not just like in today's world, right? You have all these famous artists and they're doing, you know, Alex Ross will do a cover here, he'll do a cover there, you know, and Adam Hughes will do a cover, right? No one is doing sequential art anymore in the sense that they do the cover, they do the entire interior. Jack Kirby was doing the entire thing, right? He was going cover, all the interior, and he was banging out all the big hitters, right? Again, X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Avengers, you know, all, not to mention even before that Marvels, right? He got Captain America, Fing Fang Foom, Groot. These are all characters that were crafted out of his imagination. And then one thing that Rob Liefeld talks about a lot is Jack Kirby, you know, in addition to like his actual ability to draw, one thing that all artists like look to him now in admiration is his ability to tell a story in terms of how he laid out the images, right? Like Rob Liefeld talked about, like, you give all these artists that they have the story that they tell, and they'll try and tell it in 12 different panels. And Jack Kirby will take it all and he'll do it in 3 panels, but there'll just be this huge splash page and the double splash page. So his ability to tell the story with the image is something that even those artists that you named, you know, Liefeld and those guys, that they still look up to in him in those regards. And so I just think, and then you think about the story of him, he talks about like he worked 6 days a week and his goal was like 3 pages a day. I mean, because they were paid per page. And he always said, you know, I gotta provide for my family. So I got to crank out this work. I mean, that amount of volume. And it's, you think like when you're pumping out that amount of volume, and now you obviously don't think necessarily like he's great in terms of what he's actually drawing, but if you compare page 1 to page 100 at the end of the week, let's just say, the consistency of his work, I think also is really cool to think about, in the sense that like if he was drawing it, and he was drawing a lot of it, he was bringing his A game, right? And so I think those are things to consider. Now, me personally, why I love, like I've shared this before, like Alex Ross is a great artist, you know, Adam Hughes is a great artist. Like I'm not honestly a big fan when it comes to comics of like actual like realistic kind of artwork and things like that. If I wanted that, I would go to actual fine art, let's just say. When it comes to comic books, I totally dig. And again, this is purely opinion based, this part of the argument here. I love that kind of vintage comic book art. And there is a sense of campiness to it, of course, but I love that for comic books. So Jack Kirby just like scratches all of my itches. And you are not wrong in the sense when you say he's famous because of all the characters that he did and created. But I mean, I still don't change the fact that like he still has several, you know, covers, we'll just say, that are considered some of the best covers of their time, right? Fantastic Four 49, for example, is always up in the debate for the greatest covers coming out of the Silver Age, right? I'm a big fan of FF12. Like these are all, like he's done a lot of well-known Daredevil 43. Like I think that's my favorite fighting cover that, you know, there is. Again, just some thoughts there. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Like I said, the fact that he churned out so many pages and so much work is more evident later on in his career when he went to DC, when he was pulled away from Marvel or had a fight with Stan Lee. I'm not sure the exact story. You know, maybe you know it, but he did leave, went to DC, and he churned out a bunch of work. New Gods, which was his work, his Odin, Thor run, you know, with DC. He did New Gods. He did Forever People. He did
Machine
OMAC.
Man, I think. Yeah, OMAC.
Machine Man was that was Marvel, right?
I don't know. I know that's one of the ones he did like later on in his career. I honestly don't. I don't know if it's
Machine Man was Marvel. You had Mr. Miracle. You had
Demon. That's another one he did over at DC.
Yep. So he had this huge run, and that's one of my biggest issues. Is let me see if I can share another screen here. Let's see, where is it at? Trying to find. Oh, I thought I had it saved up here. Let me see if I can. Hold on a second. But, so I'll share this one. Okay, do you love the Silver Surfer? Let me know when you can see it.
Coming up, I see a web page. It's, yeah, I know what cover it says. Fantastic 450, so it's the brown cover. Yep. Okay, I got it.
Okay. Now. This is Jack Kirby's interpretation of the Silver Surfer, right?
Correct.
This is right now my favorite to. Now that I stopped sharing the screen, let me bring up something, and let's see here. Bring up. I'm having trouble bringing this up right now, but bring up the Silver Surfer number 4.
Yep, that's John Buscema.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Correct. Which is a better cover there?
No, I think that I think Silver Surfer 4 is a better cover there for sure. I'm not saying that his work, all of his work, is superior to anyone else's work. Like there are definitely certainly covers that are better than his covers. Like that, I'm not saying that at all.
See if I can bring this one up here. So you got, now here we got it. Now let's see if I can get this one on the screen. This is where I think Kirby went downhill, was his DC run, because I think he phoned in all that stuff then. New Gods, can you see this?
I can, yeah. Scroll it down a little bit.
New Gods number 7. This is the first appearance of Steppenwolf. This is a hideous cover, in my opinion. You can't even, like, I can't grasp the size of the person, this beast or whatever that's coming at him. Like, it's just, It's god awful in my
Yeah,
opinion.
but I mean, like, again, but I think if you look, we can always find bad covers, right? Like, take Todd McFarlane. What's his first cover? It's like that Hulk book where that guy is like holding the rock or something above his head. That cover's terrible, right? Like, everyone has bad
It's not as
covers. Like,
terrible as this. I'm saying.
that's all
This was
subjective, right?
this was
That's all.
later on.
That's an opinion. Again,
This wasn't early work. This is later work when he was refined. I
yeah,
mean,
but he
his
also started in the 50s. Now you're looking at his work in the 70s. The guy's in his like, he's way older. Like, that's another thing too you got to think about when it comes to Jack Kirby. Like, the dude pumped out work from the golden age in the 40s, right, all the way into the late 70s, and I think he even had some stuff in the 80s. I mean,
yeah,
who has that breadth of? I mean, that length of consistency and time is incredible.
yeah, he had OMAC, which I think this was might have been the 80s. He did have work in the 90s actually, because there's a Tops like
Yeah,
it
he
was.
definitely has some stuff in the 90s. I know. I'm just talking about like when he was consistently pumping out published work. Right. I think in the 90s it was more just like here and there.
Okay, here's another lovely splash page.
Here, take this New Gods off the thing so we can see that big.
That's what she said.
There you go.
All right, so here's a splash page. Let me see it. All right.
Yeah.
It says OMAC #1. What the fuck is going on here? It's just his work. I think he was ahead of his time in the 60s, and I think he was probably should have been retired before that.
Look at that. Cheddar. Chris knows what it is. He knows the woman in the box. He's a fan.
And you know, it's just, I posted this on Instagram earlier today. My Viking Heroes, both covers, and you see, even with the help of Dave Stevens on this Vikings 5, the man carrying the other man, it still is a Jack Kirby cover. Like, Dave Stevens couldn't even save this cover, and this Mike Thibodeau is a much better cover. I don't care if the woman's naked or not. It's just a better cover that should have been used instead of this thing with Jack Kirby. Like,
Again, though, I mean, I get like we're now just like cherry picking certain covers. I mean, I'm not denying that they weren't all gems, right? Again, I think I think the argument lands in the breadth of work that the man did. I get you've cherry picked covers that you don't like. Like,
this is all I have. I only have the covers I don't like of Jack Kirby. But you take Thor again. I showed the Buscema cover. Here's a Thor cover. Look how much better it's drawn. How much better?
But like, if we're talking about Thor, Jim 83 is a phenomenal cover. First Appearance of Thor. That cover is awesome.
Is Avengers 1 an awesome cover? It's a Jack Kirby cover.
Yeah, it is Jack Kirby. I think it's great. I dig it.
Look how boxy it look. I mean, it's.
I mean, he has his distinct tiles. I mean, you could definitely recognize Jack Kirby's work, right? But just think about all of those characters on the Avengers. Think of Doctor Doom. Think of the Fantastic Four. Like, it's his imagination that's crafted those characters. And again, now someone today may be drawing those characters better, but his vision still lives today. Like, we're still like, even when Doctor Doom's going to show up in a movie here soon as Robert Downey Jr., he's going to have a green hood and cowl and cape, and he's going to have the steel mask and armor that Jack Kirby envisioned.
Right. And so Jack Kirby's, again, famous because of what he drew, not how he drew it. So because he was the first one to draw, just like Neil Armstrong's the first astronaut. Could have been anybody, right? But he was the best astronaut at the time. And there were better Golden Age artists, Matt Baker versus, what we say, who did the cover that time? I can't even remember off the top of my head, but no one remembers the guy who did the cover of Marvel Comics 1. But your Matt Bakers, who drew, you know, Phantom Lady, what is it? We have Jungle Comics, things of that nature. Those are all, you know, known for the artists themselves.
Yeah, again, my argument more lies, again, I think when you want to, the thought of, you know, who drew what better, I think is a completely personal preference. It's a very subjective argument. Like there are people, I'm sure plenty of people that hate Jack Kirby, what he drew, right? There are plenty of people that love him like me. Again, though, it's his imagination that crafted the entire scope of everything that remains to this day. That's like a stamp of his legacy, right? Spider-Man still looks the same, right? He drew the, like Chris mentioned, right? Ditko started out with his image of Spider-Man on AF-15, and Stan Lee said, no, that's no good. Jack, do this for me. And he killed it on AF-15, right? Same with all of these characters that he created, his vision of those characters. And again, it goes beyond the characters. You got to think about like when it comes to, like Alex Schomburg, for example, like has all those famous covers from World War II where there's all that stuff going on. You look at some of those Fantastic Four magazines where think about all those intricate machines and things like that he drew with Reed Richards. Like his imagination was awesome. I mean, he crafted so much of this entire universe.
We talked about those as some of our favorite covers.
Yeah,
and how much detail went into those old covers. But here's a Schomburg cover. I mean, this is, again, you remember Schomburg, you remember Matt Baker. Like these are well known. The guys who did the Schomburg who did those covers is well known, but the guys who did multitude of those golden age that are unknown to this day, right? Because they were drawing characters that were brand new, and they're either the character was famous, they weren't, there was too many people drawing back then, or you had the golden age, the pre-code horror books that became famous because of the covers themselves. Not as much how they were drawn. They could have been drawn much better, but they still, for their time, were ahead of their time. Matt Baker ahead of his time. Schomburg ahead of his time. I don't think Kirby, artwork-wise, was ahead of his time. I think he was ahead creatively for the universes he put together. And that's what made Kirby the legend.
I think you got to look at it, think about it like when it comes to art, right? There's a concept of pedigree involved, right? And a lot of that involves with being the first to do something a certain way, right? And that's one of these areas where Jack Kirby comes in spades, right? So like take, for example, like you think of Impressionist art, if you think about fine art, right? You got Monet, you got Manet, you got all these guys. They were the first that kind of did it. Now, is that, Manet was one of them, yes. Monet is another one, right? But for example, right, like the lily pads painting, right? That's not to say that Monet drew lily pads the best, right? He established that form of Impressionism, right? Hence why if you have a Monet, it doesn't matter if you think it's the worst Monet or it's the best Monet. I mean, it's going to be worth millions of dollars because of the pedigree associated with a Monet painting, right? Similarly, if you kind of apply that theory with comic book art, right? Jack Kirby started this all. He created that entire Marvel universe, right? So the pedigree behind his name is larger than anyone else that did art. Again, that's not specifically comparing the way he drew, compared to Todd McFarlane or anything like that. I'm just saying in art, we have that concept of pedigree, I think does apply here. And I think that's where Jack Kirby is the king. Again, no one has made as much impact on the industry when you look at the sheer breadth of and volume of work that the guy did for 40, 50 years. No one even comes close to that level of impact when it comes to the art.
No one comes close to the level of impact.
Yes.
That Kirby
when you look at the number of characters that have his fingerprints in terms of how they were created and what they like. For example, take the Silver Surfer, my favorite character. If I understand correctly, Stan Lee said, he had this idea of Galactus and he wanted to have a herald. And I think he told Jack Kirby, like, it'd be cool to have him on a surfboard or something like that. Jack Kirby, took those notes and then crafted what Galactus and what the Silver Surfer looked like. That is fully his imagination. Like, think about Galactus with that head mask and the way, like, it's crazy, but like, that is still the Galactus that we see today. Obviously, it's just drawn a little differently, but it is still Jack Kirby's vision, right? When you think of the movie Thor Ragnarok, this is something that Rob Liefeld said, all those images you see, all that imagery, that's pure Jack Kirby's imagination that created all of that, right? So his impact extends as long as we're reading, watching, collecting these characters. Jack Kirby lives on forever, right? His touch is all over everything.
Right. hence his legendary status, his iconic status doesn't diminish because of his artwork wasn't up to par, in my opinion. Because what I'm getting back to is that book that I found, or I got for Christmas so many years ago. It didn't draw me to go back and find more Jack Kirby. It drew me into more Spider-Man, and then evolving into McFarlane and what my tastes are today. So I was not drawn to anything that Jack Kirby did. I was definitely drawn to the galactic, the galactic world, the space world,
Cosmic, yeah.
cosmic world. Thank you, Silver Surfer and Thanos and that whole Infinity Gauntlet series. But I never went back to go get older issues of Fantastic Four or Silver Surfer. That run that Ron Lim did was good enough for me, and so I just thought that those guys did a fantastic job of carrying on the legacy that he started, but was, it could have been anybody else. Let's just put it that way. Could anyone else have drawn? Yes. Could Jack Kirby have been somebody who was simply creating these stories? Could have been done differently. Could someone else? I think he just right place, right time. But there was definitely better artists that could have been used, and maybe it was just Jack Kirby and Stan Lee had some type of connection, and that's why they could churn out books on books on books.
I don't think, again, Marvel didn't have an unlimited stable of artists, right? There's no one that was producing the amount of work that, even like the other artists you think about at the time, like Steve Ditko did Spider-Man, and then he did like the Strange Tales run, right? You have, and later in the 60s, you have Gene Colan that does like the Iron Man run, right? Jack Kirby's still doing multiple runs. So I would say, they didn't have this just endless stable of artists, right? So unless you had someone with Jack Kirby's ability to produce the volume of work, right, the Marvel universe, it would not be nearly as vast as it was without someone like Kirby, right? His ability to, again, just crank out published work is crazy.
So this goes back. This is Kid Colt Outlaw. This is a Jack Kirby cover from Silver Age Western.
Mm-hmm.
Does it look like a Kirby cover to you?
I'd have to look at it a little closer, but I know he did a bunch of those Kid Colt books.
He just did the cover on this one.
Yeah.
This one is Dodge City Kid. This looks like Kirby, but it's actually Don Heck. Very similar artwork. Can't really tell the two apart, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think Kirby, what's the word, deteriorated over time with his work, especially his DC run was awful. There was cool characters created that are still today, New Gods, Demon, we went all over those guys. But again, Brandon has said he's the blueprint for why we have these characters now, and that's why the credit should be given.
Yeah, and that's the point I was making earlier, Brandon, before you probably saw at the very beginning. I was comparing this to, and there's you can look at this in numerous different, but I was referencing guitarists, right? You wouldn't have Tom Morello today if you didn't have Jimi Hendrix before him, and you wouldn't have Jimi Hendrix today if you didn't have Robert Johnson before him, right? These guys that you have to set the foundation, and then the landscape evolves as you continue to move forward, right? Again, Jack Kirby laid the blueprint, like Brandon said. He created all, like he started it all, the foundation. He built and he built a damn solid one. If you ask me, again, I think no other artist, again, can churn out the amount of work he does. Like we don't have all these great characters without Jack Kirby being able to pump out this much work.
And that's where the credit's given to him. It's just the fact that it doesn't draw me in. I have all of 4 Jack Kirby covers in my collection. That's all I have. So it's not like I seek these out, because I would only buy them because they're first appearances or key books in the Silver Age, and he happened to draw them.
Yeah, I do think, like, I think it's a totally fair statement to for anyone, not just you. I think it's a totally fair statement for anyone to say, personally, they don't necessarily love Jack Kirby's style or the way he drew. I think it's a totally valid statement, right? Because again, that's complete preference. There could be some artist that you and I both think stinks, and someone else may say he's great or she's great, right? That is a personal preference thing. I think when we think about the topic of Jack Kirby, king or clown, we got to look at the picture beyond just that singular ability to draw and look at the entire legacy and the impact and his ability, like I said, going back to his ability to tell stories within comics. That all encompasses that question, in my opinion. Yeah,
let me
Brandon,
give
you're
two
not the first one to
examples,
say FF.
or try to. Yeah, I mean, his early work was some of his best work. Like I showed, some of those westerns were good work on the cover. I think when he tried to do too much of his shading, I think he lofted and things got lost and too much black and dark work in the background, and there was too much going on in some of the screens. But if you take, let's say, what was I going to get at here? If you take the movies, okay, the movie The Matrix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great movie, well known, very popular. But what was the concept of The Matrix? If you think about it, where did they get that story from? They got it from Total Recall and Terminator molded in together to make The Matrix, right? It was some new idea formulated from two older ideas. That's how I see it, right?
Okay.
Those two, Matrix wouldn't
Wait,
have been what it is today if you didn't have.
Is that your thought, or is that actually a known thing? I have no idea.
That's my thought. I don't know if that's right, but that's how I put
Okay.
those two movies together, and you got robots, AI, and you got, things going in people's heads that they're dreaming things, and you put those together and you make one cool movie, right? But it wasn't a new concept, but it was a new type of movie. So someone like McFarlane doesn't have the ability to recreate Spider-Man or the Hulk. It's already created. He can make it better. So it's just the timing of, like we said, Jack Kirby started it all. These guys don't have the ability to make a new character that is as iconic as the Fantastic Four just yet. Spawn. Would Spawn be popular if McFarlane drew him? If he didn't draw him?
I guess what one thing we can consider, right? Like if we were to, again, DC was still in full effect in the Silver Age, right? When we talk about like the prime of Kirby's career was in that Silver Age when he was cranking out all those characters and titles, and they became very popular, right? Marvel boomed, especially with the start of Fantastic Four #1. Prior to that, DC was kind of owning the game. When Marvel went that direction of superheroes and took off, Jack Kirby was the man behind the pencil, right? I would imagine, though, his ability to craft those stories with his images is part of the reason why people were drawn to those books. So my question then is, there were other comic book artists that worked at DC and things like that. How come none of them were able to produce anything that took off as well and in as large of scope?
Well, who drew over at DC at the time? You had Infantino.
Carmen
correct?
Infantino is one name I know. Like again, when it comes to the Silver Age of DC, I'm very ill-informed. But I think that's a function of because it's not as well known as the Marvel Silver Age.
But during the Silver Age, though, Batman was very popular because of the clowny, corny TV series that was on at the time, right? So Batman was popular, but the artists for him were not.
I mean, I'm sure Batman's run was still pretty well read. I just think, again, when it was just Batman, let's just say, or and a handful of others. Like again, it doesn't have nearly a number of titles or runs that Jack Kirby's killing it on.
True, it doesn't, and he put them on the map, and that's the biggest issue is, with that, the fact that he was there first. I guess it's would I choose his artwork? No, and that's my personal opinion. Are the stories intriguing? They're kind of campy now, but they still play well today because of the universe that was created. But in my opinion, it's being the first person to be able to produce something gives you the advantage of being legendary versus something like Spawn, who became popular. Will we be reading Spawn if McFarlane didn't draw it? Would he have 350?
Well, I mean, let's just say if Rob Liefeld created Spawn, would it be popular?
Well, think about it. Rob Liefeld created Youngblood, Beowulf. I mean, there's a ton of crap that was created in the 90s, and Rob Liefeld went down the shitter too in regards to his work he put out. He was turning out a ton of work, and he got worse and worse and worse until recently he's gotten better. But you can't tell me that X-Force 1 and New Mutants, those covers weren't great. As much as He drew pouches for everybody, you know, but they were great covers. I mean, they catch your eye, kind of like a Kirby cover, and it influenced people. And influenced people like John Romita Jr. Let me see if I can get this up on the screen here real quick. But John Romita Jr. is well known. What's that?
Don't get me started on John Romita Jr.
Not a fan of him.
I've talked about that. No, not a huge fan of John Romita Jr. I guess that's a personal opinion.
Let me see if I can get up. And I can 100% agree with that. And let me show you the screen here real quick, and I'll show. Got to be able to show the screen. All right, you see it? Getting there.
Yeah.
Slow.
See, personally, I think that cover sucks. But
see it?
Yeah, I see it. I said first. I
100% agree. It looks like, yeah, and looks like Jack Kirby and John Romita had a kid, or Rob Liefeld and Jack Kirby had a kid, and this is what the kid drew. It's got that boxy look that Kirby used to draw, and then all the pouches that John Romita that Liefeld had on there. It's a god awful.
Let's say so. One of the arguments you're saying is that it only worked out because of the timing, and he was the guy that was there, that was able to make all these characters. I think when it comes to success, right, it's a combination of two. There are plenty of people that have a ton of talent that have no success. There are a ton of people that have opportunity that have had no success, right? Success comes from a combination of ability and opportunity, right? So Jack Kirby, yes, did have the opportunity to be there at the start when this kind of golden era of superhero comics really took off, right? But he also capitalized that, I would say, with his ability to tell those stories with his images.
Oh, and I think that's I would not argue with that, because
Facts. Brandon's with me on this.
This isn't Mon yet. Mon,
no,
Mon with you here pitching us.
He's a Kirby guy too, though, so he'd be on my side.
He is. He'd be. And I thought I'd have some more help on this side, but it's just I can't debate the fact that his legendary, why he is what he is. Okay, he could tell a story with the panels he drew, but they were drawn terribly, in my opinion. But he did tell the story. It's like I could read a Donald Duck book to my kids and have an intriguing story to read through, and the artistry that's done in that book, that's probably better than Kirby's. His early work was good. As he went on, I think it went downhill, and that's just, he wasn't someone who drew me in to his work, and I didn't follow. I have no Fantastic Four. I have no early Silver Surfer, and just those couple books that I showed you. I mean, I did have a Black Panther or Fantastic Four number 48 that he's first Black Panther, but
52.
52. So no reason I don't hunt him down. I don't, unless it's a key book. And that's where I get at with him, is that his was the opportunity, that he was there on the ground floor. And that's why he's known today. And that's why Babe Ruth is known for what he's, and Ty Cobb. And there are people today that, hit more home runs than he did and were better players. But again, that's refinement over the years of taking something and making it better. And
I get that. I think also too, another point, you keep saying that like you don't find yourself going back and collecting Kirby. However, I would say like the books that he's known for, like, I don't know, I wouldn't say like, for example, I collect comics for the most part for significance, right? I'm a big first appearance collector, right? So that obviously lends me towards collecting a lot of Jack Kirby, because obviously he did a lot of first appearances. I think you collect a little differently though, and that may also contribute to why you don't necessarily go and chase down Kirby covers. I think if you collect it a little differently, you may have more Jack Kirby books independent of your personal opinion of not liking him as an artist.
Correct. I don't necessarily like Batman #1, that cover. It's yellow, sticks out. Superman #1 or Action Comics #1 is a great cover. For being as old as it is, it's a great cover. It tells a great story. It was homaged by McFarlane in the Spider-Man run in 302, I think it is, or 303. I can't remember exactly what number it was, but it's a great cover.
Maybe. I know what you're talking about. He's holding up the police car.
Have it. Yep. And that's a great cover. I have Action Comics up here, and that's a great, well-told cover there. It's just, those are iconic because they're the first first appearance of Superman, the first appearance of Batman, the first appearance of the Joker. The cover isn't great, but it tells the story. It was what was drawn back then, and there were some better artists back then. Someone named earlier Schomburg and Baker. They were better back then. They're well known for their work, not the characters, right? So again, going back to later artists, Buscema, Ramita, these guys are not known for making Spider-Man. They're known for making great covers with Spider-Man and drawing and keeping the lasting love for Spider-Man to continue for what is it now, 800 some issues.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like, you know, you brought up like Rob Liefeld's Youngbloods, right? So when you think about it, like Rob Liefeld created the Youngblood IP, we'll say. That didn't catch popularity for whatever reason, right? It could have been the writing, could have been the art, right? What we do know is that Jack Kirby's characters did take off and they have staying power. They have staying power to this day and for beyond forward. So again, I understand you personally don't necessarily care for his individual artwork, but I think the fact that all of these characters that he's created, like almost every major character he's created still is actively involved in the comic universe that we have today, is a testament to those that feel that Jack Kirby's work was great. And his, you know, that, you know what I'm saying? It's like, let's just say he had the opportunity to create all those characters, like you said. If he didn't have the ability to draw them to a way that captivated others, it could have all flopped. And those characters
could have been like Youngblood 1.
Exactly. That's what I was like. So again, I understand you don't personally like him, but again, the fact that these characters and these images and the imagination and the visions have, again, stayed true. Spider-Man's costume is still the same. Or, as you know, again, I get, he did the cover of 15 and do the whole run, but I'll use some of it, like the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, right? These guys all still look essentially the same, right? And that is a testament to how beloved Jack Kirby's imagination was.
Is it that Jack Kirby's beloved of the character became beloved because of the storyline? Is it the writing that kept people in? You know, it's a combination of those two. And because people love Spider-Man because they love the Hulk, they're not going to change the look. New Coke versus Coke, right?
No, you're totally right there in the sense that like there's definitely a contribution there. Like, you know, we can't take Stan Lee's ability to write the stories behind these characters and his ability to market has also been unparalleled in this genre, right? That combination helped last. But I think if either of those things were just independent and one of them wasn't up to snuff, they wouldn't have. Like, let's just say Jack Kirby drew the Hulk as well as, you know, as he did, but Stan Lee's Hulk stories sucked, right? The Hulk probably would have gone down in flames, right? Conversely, Stan Lee could have been writing killer stories with Hulk, but if kids in those days weren't captivated by the images that Jack Kirby created, the Hulk still would have gone down in flames. Like, I think there's definitely a version of a contribution of both the writing and the artist and the work behind it and the story, that how it's told with the images that have made these characters last.
And I'm showing those because that's exactly what you're saying. Those are Kirby drawn with terrible storylines that didn't go very far. Forever People. I don't know. They still make these Forever People. They weren't forever.
I don't think so. They weren't forever.
They weren't forever. And then OMAC, cool storyline. Probably thought he might be used in the new James Gunn universe, but not. I mean, he's not. I know he came back in the 90s, but it was Kirby art. It was the combination of those two. They were the dynamic duo of the time that could churn out great writing and great. I'm not going to say great artwork, but decent enough artwork to compel people to keep buying them.
You know, it's funny. It's funny you just say that real quick. I just say in that podcast with Rob Liefeld, if I remember this correctly, because I listened to it a few days ago now, he said his all-time favorite work from Jack Kirby was OMAC.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I thought that's kind of funny. Yeah. So I mean, it definitely did appeal. I agree. It's not a story that carried on, right? Like, obviously, I'm sure a few people like it. Rob Liefeld obviously did, but like, it's definitely not one that caught fire and continues to this day, like some of the other ones.
But again, Kirby drew New Gods, and you have Dark Side because of Jack Kirby. Again, another concept of Galactus / Silver Surfer, whatever he was going with there, another cosmic being. Yeah, exactly. He left. I don't know exactly why he left, but we were trying to figure that out earlier.
No, I mean, Brandon's definitely right. Like, him and Stan Lee were beefing. I don't know the details of the beef, but like that is why he split to DC. I mean, when Jack Kirby died, there was still a beef between the two. I mean, even still to this day, I think that Jack Kirby's kids still often trying to pound the table for that Jack Kirby doesn't get enough credit. So,
yeah, another one. Don't forget New Gods. We just talked about that because that, again, those are some of, in my opinion, some of the worst covers he's done. We showed the Steppenwolf cover, New Gods #7. Just
another one that Rob Liefeld, just, it's funny that you said it's another one that Rob Liefeld said he absolutely loved as a kid growing up was those New Gods.
And again, if you're a kid, like I mean, Ron Lim was in my opinion, a great artist. Jim,
yeah, I mean, Starlin, he was a Silver Surfer that I grew up in. Silver Surfer is my favorite character.
Jim Starlin, George Perez. That's great work for the Infinity Gauntlet. Like, that's great work. That drew me in as someone who was more turned. I didn't read them back then. I'm pretty sure I read Spider-Man books, the Venom run, and Infinity Wars and all that. But I love the artwork. I would try to mimic Ron Lim's Silver Surfer and Thanos. I didn't go back to try to, again, like I said this earlier, I didn't go back to try to find older Kirby work just because it didn't draw me in. I wasn't, I didn't care enough because I liked the new artwork that was coming out and it was compelling to me.
Yeah, but I think it's also too a reflection of the era, I think sometimes, right? Like, take Ron Lim's Silver Surfer. Like, he was the first one to really make the Surfer that kind of really shiny chrome metallic Silver Surfer, right?
Yeah, with the shine on the top of his head.
Exactly, right? But I think that's also a reflection of, like, shiny things were a thing in the 90s, as we know, with all these foil covers and things like that, right? So that influences how Ron Lim drew the Surfer, right? I think similarly, like the era that Kirby was creating work, right? The 40s, the 50s, the 60s, into the 70s. I think the nature of the environment around him also reflected in how he ended up drawing these characters. One thing too, I am curious about, like, you talk about like the shading and things like that, the kind of maybe like these little minute details. I am curious because of the speed at which he had to draw, if that was a function of like, how much time can I put in? So how can I draw this at this speed? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, to be able to crank out as much work.
And I think that you can see on the later DC works that he was churning out a lot of work. He was older at that point. He's churning out New Gods, OMAC, Demon, because it wasn't Kazar. What was that one? Commandy, which is the terrible. It's like Kazar except for the DC version of it. So he was churning out a lot of work in the 70s because he probably had a new contract with DC and had to put all these items out, trying to get credit for everything because what happened is falling out at Marvel. But none of that stuff really took off. Commandy wasn't a big name. Demon is a kind of a stable character. I think he's part of what's the name of that DC horror with Swamp Thing and Constantine and it's not the like the Monster Squad, but there's a squad of
the Dark Justice League.
Yes, I think Dark Justice. I think he's part of that. But other than that, like Forever People, OMAC, it just kind of didn't take. And was it the writing? Was it Stan Lee and the combination? I think that's where it came from. It's just those concepts they were able to do 10 years earlier. And, Brandon, I think it was Brandon who mentioned that Platt's also drew it's another Prophet. Okay, so Platt is known for Moon Knight, has some great covers in later Moon Knight issues in the 90s. They're very hard to, I haven't found them. They're expensive books. He drew Prophet for Image. He has a lot of great covers, the same type of artwork on these Prophet covers, and you can get those for $1.
Yes, I think Moon Knight, right? Because it was a cool character, so the person writing the stories was probably good stories. Like, I'm not denying, like, there's that combo there. And again, that kind of goes back to my point about success is not one thing or the other. It's a combination, right? The ability with the opportunity, right? Jack Kirby had the ability. He had the opportunity in terms of like the timing of when he was there. And the opportunity also involves being able to do it with Stan Lee, who wrote great stories and then more importantly knew how to market those stories to make them, right? So, and I think that's anyone's success, right? No one stands alone. Everyone had help getting to where they got to. But I just think too, when we talk about legacy here and king or clown, like to me, if you were to do a Mount Rushmore of comic book artists and writers, I just don't know how you don't put Jack. I don't. Jack Kirby's on that 4.
He's on a 4. He's on that for the creative side of it, but he can't artistically. He can't be on there. I mean, maybe you have to have 2 Mount Rushmores, maybe 3.
I mean, again, I think when I guess that would be a question of like, what is the Mount Rushmore supposed to evaluate, right? Like to me, if I was to think of a Mount Rushmore, it would be impact is what I would base who I selected for the mountain. The 4 heads would be based on impact, not on one specific skill, which would in your case be the actual.
So if you go back to Golden Age, who do you put in the Golden Age? Who represents the Golden Age? We'll have one for every age of comics. So who represents Golden? Jack must represent Silver. Is it Stan Lee?
I mean, I think if I did a Silver Age, I think Kirby and Stan Lee would definitely be on there unquestioned.
You only have 4 people that can be on the Mount.
Agreed.
But it has to be per era.
Yeah. Again, I'm not as well versed. The thing that's tough with the Golden Age is you have so many different genres. Like I remember Alan, the comic collector geek, said like in the Golden Age, they produced more comics than in any era, right? And there was romance, there was war, there was Western, there was superhero, there was monsters, there was horror, right? So I can really only speak to superheroes, right? That's kind of my niche, right? Obviously, I know a little bit about PCH, I know a little bit about Good Girl, but there's no way I'd be able to. I mean, I would assume just knowing when it comes to the Golden Age, my perspective of knowledge is so narrow, right? So for me, right off the top of my head, I would think like Matt Baker, Alex Schomburg, right? Will Eisner, those are the names I know. I don't know Wally enough to know that I would put him up there personally, right? So, but I can speak to superheroes, and especially in the Silver Age, and I know for a fact that for me, Kirby and Stan Lee would both be on 2 of the 4.
Yeah, you almost would have to put them both on there. There's really no one for the Golden Age because it's hard to disseminate. I mean, Matt Baker, like you mentioned, those great artists, those covers for what they're known for, but for the amount of work that Kirby and Stan Lee, produced, they would take up 2 spots. Who would fill up the next 2 spots?
Yeah. What's funny in that question is if you were to go to the Golden Age, I bet anyone's Mount Rushmore would only consist, I bet, of artists, right? No one really talks about writers when it comes to the Golden Age. And that's, probably for a good reason. Like, especially like we think of PCH, people always talk about like those stories were actually terrible. It's all about those covers.
Right.
Whereas like once you get into the Silver Age, you get into the Bronze Age, right? I think if you were to have this as a poll of like who would be your 4, you would definitely have writers and artists on that list.
And you're probably right, because I don't know the stories that are well known, except maybe I don't know if it's Detective Comics. It might be the first hypodermic needle on the cover.
The Detect 30 something. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
33. So that might be known for its story, but really, for the most part, it's the characters, the people that created these characters are well known. Bob Kane and the gentleman who created Superman.
Superman was Joe Siegel and Schuster and Siegel.
So
and then Batman was Finger and Kane.
So you put those 4, and that's Mount Rushmore Golden Age, and that's probably is what propelled it today. What superheroes are known for. You put those 4 in there. You got Kirby and Stan Lee. You really have no one else for the Copper and Bronze Age because.
The Bronze Age, I would put like Neil Adams would be on there for me.
Neil Adams, you got Buscema, but again, those guys, they define the times, and that's why, again, Kirby is king. I'll say that as we come to the end here, start to close things out. I'll say Kirby is king. His artwork is very clownish. So that's where I
In
take
your
the stand.
opinion, in your opinion.
It's true. I mean, he's the king of that era because we wouldn't have what we had today. We wouldn't have today what we have if it wasn't for him. Bottom line, and Stan Lee. But the two are a tandem that come together. That one would not be successful without the other one, which is known because of Kirby's later work at DC. So
it is.
Stan Lee could have made anybody else. He could have made Buscema and Ditko as famous as Kirby.
Again, though, I don't know if he would have because, well, he could have, but I think the question lies, maybe he couldn't have because they couldn't pump out the work as fast as Kirby did, right? That's something to consider, right? Maybe that's why he leaned on Kirby so much.
And that's like going back to baseball and other, Babe Ruth had so many home runs, but he didn't have as many games as Hank Aaron had and Barry Bonds and all that stuff. So it's a sign of times. It's so hard to debate somebody outside of their own era and what someone produced things that came up later on, like we talked about earlier. So you got to give him credit for that. That's what makes Jack Kirby a king. Mm-hmm. But he's co-king with Stan Lee, and he wouldn't be.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's like
McFarlane's popular because he drew Spider-Man like no one else could.
Yeah, and this is inspiring. Like I want to put a poll up on my Instagram feed. Not that I get a lot of responses, but I am curious whether it be there or in the comments here. I'd be curious to ask anyone that watched this video. I would just say we don't even need to go by era. If you were to have a Mount Rushmore, yeah, Brandon, you're exactly right. Perfect storm of circumstance, opportunity, ability, all that stuff we were talking about, 100%. And also, Brandon, shout out to you for contributing to the conversation here. Thanks for joining us tonight.
That's good artwork on your picture there. I like it.
Yeah, and JP, if you don't know, Brandon's Tech Geek 2000 on Instagram. Okay. Yeah, we had him on. You were gone actually the day he and I sat down. Anyways, my question for all would be, as we wrap this up, all eras, who is on your Mount Rushmore for comics, right? For me, I know I would absolutely put both Jack Kirby and Stan Lee on that Mount Rushmore. I'm not sure who spots 3 and 4 would be debatable for me. Those would definitely be on my 2 of 4. I'd be curious to see what anyone else says. Oh, I mean, you got 200. My bad, Brandon.
I mean, you got the other two spots. It's almost difficult because you have the creator of Batman and Superman on there, and there's 4 people that created those characters that. And you got,
yeah, again, I mean, so but again, there's gonna be a lot of people that don't care about superheroes that love Golden Age comics, right? So they probably wouldn't even consider those 4 people. So,
but who else would you? That's the thing. I'd be interested to know who else they would put on that.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like even in the if you consider all eras, like there still may be several people that put Matt Baker, Alex Schomburg on their Mount Rushmore. So again, that is absolutely definitely a subjective question in terms of like there's a lot of personal preference, but I am curious because it is interesting to know who would people put on that Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious myself because you can easily, like I said, Stan Lee and Kirby go on there. Unfortunately, Kirby's on there and against my better judgment, but he's there for a reason. Again, but it's his contribution to the comic book world itself, the universe we love to collect in, and there are some other people that could be named, but he just perfect circumstances. So he is king, but he is a clown at the same time. He is both. He is the chameleon of the Silver Age.
Yeah, but Brandon mentions Frank Frazetta, another one that I'm sure a lot of people put on their Mount Rushmore. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up what we were going to discuss today, and we've kind of run on to that hour mark. For those that are going to check this out, thanks for those that have been watching live. The few of you that thanks for coming on and contributing to the conversation. For those that catch it later, again, let us know your opinions on the Mount Rushmore, your opinions on Jack Kirby. We're going to do this again next week. I think we were talking that next week's topic. We're going to go with grading comics. Do you grade? Do you not grade? What are the pros? What are the cons? Do you want to grade? Should you grade? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's kind of a hot button topic these days. So I think it'll be fun to get into. But otherwise, I think that's all we got.
Yep.
JP, any last thoughts?
Always believe in yourself.
There we go. Hey, and again, to end it off with a Jack Kirby quote, your budget is only limited by your imagination, and his imagination had no limits.
That's a good one. One of his only good contributions.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
Later.